Okay, here's a video to kind of highlight a coolant mod I did for my 2007 YZ-85. Of course, this can apply to any liquid-cooled dirt bike. Typically, the coolant will, of course, come out of this tube, and then any overflow just drains to the ground. Normally, it's not a huge deal, but at the same time, down here in the heat, you want to keep as much cooling in these engines as possible. Even though this is an 85, and I believe it's rated, it's an 07, so it's rated at somewhere around 18 horsepower. I mean, it's a lot for a little bit engine. So more horsepower means you generate more heat, and more heat means you got to reject more heat. More heat generated, more heat rejected. So one, I had to need to replace radiator cap. I'll talk about that a little bit. And the other is I went ahead and made my own coolant reservoir, and it was really simple. And even with its location, it does not interfere with cooling, does not interfere with the radiator, does not interfere with the shroud. Kind of hold that in place. And you can, it's not easy, but you can see the coolant level through the vents. So it can be monitored. Now, first thing, of course, I noticed the coolant was just dumping all over the place when it ran. So, of course, there's the original radiator cap, and you can see the little 1.1 near out to the right of center. Now, that number on the radiator cap refers to pressures in bars. 1 bar is about 14.5 psi. And, of course, Yamaha, in their infinite wisdom, decided they want to charge $25 for this at Yamaha, which, of course, I know that's the worst place to go. Check online, they were anywhere between $12 to $15, and went up even once you included shipping. There's got to be a better way, so I did. Thankfully, my guys at local Autozone, they were really helpful. We searched and searched, and we found this. Duralast, it's not showing up in the camera, it's just washing out, but it's part number 7513. This actually goes to and when we cross-referenced it, goes to a 2009 Nissan Cube. So, kind of funny, a 85cc two-stroke uses the same radiator cap as a 1.5 liter four-cylinder, but anyway. I'm sure that cap fits more vehicles than that, but that's just happened to be the way it came up. Now, this cap, I don't know if it says on the cap, maybe it's just on the box. Yeah, I didn't really say here, but the, maybe it's on the box. I didn't really say here either. But I believe this was 0.9 bars. And so really, 1.1 bars is about 15 psi. 0.9 bars is about 13 psi. You're still getting plenty of pressure in order to prevent boilover. That and when you mix anything with the water, that increases the boil temperature too, so it's not an issue to go down to lower pressure. I've heard of people replacing radiator caps go as high as 1.8 bars. Now you're getting up to 25 psi. That's getting really, really high. You're going to start blowing hoses. You're putting extra strain on the water pumps. You're just asking for problems going up that high. That's absolutely not necessary, especially on these little engines. So, okay, what happened to my flash? That's a stupid camera. Anyway. So that was that radiator cap. And of course, this Duralast cap, maybe that barcode will show up now with the flash off. There you go. There you go, now you can see it. And of course, this was only about $7 plus tax, so that I could deal with. It was more of a principal thing at that point. Now, a couple things here on the reservoir. So I had to reroute the tubing, which is no big deal. This is 1/4-inch tubing that you can get at any big box store, no big deal. Okay, come on, focus. Focus, doesn't want to focus. Oh, come on. Better. So that's no big deal. The other thing though is, of course, I had to figure out about what volume I wanted in here, and this was kind of a guesstimate. I have some nylon adapters here to fit the 1-inch final tubing. Did that on both ends. I wrapped some Teflon tape around those threads and hose clamped it. That's plenty tight. It is not leaking. Even after several rides, it's not leaking. And of course, yeah, I see the zip ties, kind of low tech. But the other is, you can't really see it. You can barely see it down here. So how it's mounted really is steel tape. And I mean, sure, it comes with other names. It comes by other names, but this is what you see. There's hardly any of it left on my roll. I use this quite a bit for obviously low load applications, which this is. But I made little brackets, and this actually bolts in the back to where the tank mounts. The tank up here on this bolt, and you can't see it, but the radiator bolt down here. So this isn't being suspended by the radiator hose or any other fluid fittings or couplings or anything else down here. It's actually mounted and being held by other mounting points on the bike. So this isn't adding strain to parts that shouldn't have any strain on them. And like I say, it's fairly low tech, but it works. It works pretty well. I did drill a hole and put a tiny screw up here in the top. Now that is to fill it. I try and keep this bottom hose purged. So in order to fill this reservoir, and you pull this top tube off, and you can get coolant down into the tube, but you have to allow air to vent back out. So that's why this little screw is here. You take this screw out, you can pour fluid in, and that gives a place for the air to go. You slowly put the fluid in, and it fills up. No mess, no fuss, no big deal. And of course, any of you out there with kids, you're probably like me and have about 20 of these things laying around, you know, for administering medicine. So this one's obviously now permanently in my garage. I'm not going to try and give medicine in this thing anymore. But it fits here really well. You just suck the fluid up, plunge it in slowly, have that screw out. Once you get the fluid level in there you want, just whatever, min-max, who cares. Put the hose back on, put the screw back in, you now have a closed reservoir and vent it out. Now this tube is the one that runs down the frame and exits down here out of the way. So now the tube that would normally go down there is here coming out of the radiator and hose clamp. Now you see here I have it necked down to from a 1/4 to a 1/8, and still stupid camera's not focusing, sorry for the blurry pictures. This little clamp I did here, one there's some glue in here to kind of help glue these hoses together, and the other is this is safety wire, lock wire. So I've wrapped it, twisted it, and kind of made my own clamp. This is the factory clamp. So the reason though why necking down to a small tube and then doing that again down here is again, it is a small cooling system. So if it burps air, it's not going to be much. So if it burps that air, if that tube is large and long, it'll burp the air into the tube, and it'll stay in the tube, and then when the system cools, it just sucks that air right back in the radiator. So if I can get if I can reduce the volume of this tube to as small as possible, then when it burps that air, hopefully, the air bubble, especially after riding and bouncing around, will travel to a point where it'll burp up into the reservoir. So air goes up in here, the fluid has to displace it, and that pushes down in here, and that means I maintain a purged system. In fact, there's a little bit of air in there right now because it's been really hot, so this thing hasn't been, I've run it to keep it, everything lubed up, but I haven't ridden it really in a couple of months now, so I mean, obviously it's not a perfect seal, so it's gotten a little bit of air in there, but for the most part, this burps, air purges, bubbles up in here, and it keeps the radiator absolutely full without me having to worry about topping it off. I think that's really about it. I mean, this system's been working great, and it just, you know, keeps things clean, keeps from dumping coolant everywhere. Have to keep topping it off, have to keep adding more coolant into it, adding more water. It's just one less thing to deal with, and it's also a good way of monitoring, make sure you still have coolant in the systems, even if you have air in this line down here. You know, as long as this stays, you know, relatively in the right position, then you know that the radiator is full. So you know you're going to have maximum cooling without having to crack the cap and check. So anyway, hopefully folks find this worthwhile, folks find this useful, and that's the whole reason why I make any of these videos that I do. And let me know what you think, and hopefully this gives you some ideas for your bike, your projects, whatever else you have. Any small engine really that liquid cool could benefit from this if it doesn't have a reservoir tank already. So signing off for now. Till next time.